Event contracts might not be the most exciting part of planning an event until something goes wrong. Then they become everything. When planning an event, the goal is to avoid messy and imbalanced contracts and negotiate fairer terms with confidence. Today on Strategize Your Business Online, we're going to talk about for event planners and for those who are planning an event, read the fine print before you sign. Heather Reed, thank you for being on this live. How are you today?
I am doing well, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah,
So,
and thank you so much for saying yes. I just want to do a bit of housekeeping, Heather. So, for
yeah,
those who are watching the live, thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you're watching this live on LinkedIn or watching the replay later, this is interactive. So if you have any questions or anything to chime in and say, please put it in the comments. But first, introduce yourself. Let us know the name of your business, your website, so we can come and visit it, and who it is that you serve. So, Heather Reed, I'm going to give you the floor. If you could start off by letting us know about your business and who it is that you serve.
sure, happy to. So, 30 years into entrepreneurship, I created a second business. My first business was about event planning and association management. And I started back when we were using fax machines, Dee, uh, and did the event planning for associations primarily, and did multi-day conferences, a few social events, things like that, but mostly multi-day conferences. And then in 2013, I was just compelled to start paying attention to how event planners communicated about contracts. I overheard a planner that I hold in very high esteem say, I didn't know that you could negotiate force majeure. And force majeure is a technical legal principle. And I was like gobsmacked. I'm like, what? Why doesn't she know that you could negotiate that? And so starting in 2013, I thought maybe there's a way that I can support other event professionals, organizations, associations with bringing my knowledge and love. I am a contract nerd. Maybe there's a way I could bring what I love to support their work. Because truth be known, most planners are there for they're creative. They are people. If I can say that. And maybe contracts is really the dry, boring, must have, but not so alluring. So I started a journey of just saying, I'm here to support, be in and out of your process, but allow me to bring what I know to your process of negotiating a contract, so that you are better protected. And you being the association, the corporation, as such. So it started really kind of organically with, could I make a business out of this? And here we are 12 years later, and I work pretty much full time reviewing other organizations' venue contracts primarily. I have looked at speaker contracts, I have looked at decor contracts, catering contracts, and audiovisual contracts. So all aspects of the event industry are supported by contracts. And so my full-time work now is supporting that, not from a legal perspective, because I am not legal counsel. As a paralegal, I cannot work and create language for contracts. But what I bring is the 30 years of studying event contracts, so that it's about event logistics, it's about event risk, and then obviously providing guidance on when is legal advice required. If they don't have access to it, here's the questions to ask, etc. So that's been my journey. I work for individual entrepreneurs. I've done, for those entrepreneurs that are speakers, I've reviewed their speaker contract when they're hiring out their services. Certainly, they need to be protected from situations that happen in our industry. I've worked on, as I said, catering contract. Just really in the best interest of bringing my 30 years of event logistics to a document that may not have a lot of those logistics protected in them. So,
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Earlier, you mentioned the fact that event planners, they love the allure and all of the glitz, I guess, of things that happen, and also mentioned that maybe it sounds like they may have difficulty like reading a contract. Did you find it tricky moving from the surface part of things into what it is that you're doing now?
yeah, and I would say that when I started 30 years ago, I was a generalist in a lot of different things, and I was able to work successfully as that. Event professionals today need to be highly trained in engagement with their attendees, in safety protocols, in food and beverage, service to not harm attendees with dietary restrictions or requirements. So there is a lot of academics behind event professionals today. But what is also true is that uh, most did not get into the industry to read contracts. And so it's really not where a lot of people's interest lies. However, it is a core part of what we do. And I know that coming out of event programs, post-secondary programs, contracts are really not focused on in post-secondary education. And so, a planner or a professional that is well versed in how to interpret data, how to increase engagement, how to, appeal to the senses and how to deliver a message. Contracts are still kind of an area that there isn't a lot of education available for. And so that's where I don't think event professionals and can exist as a generalist so much anymore. It's
Mm,
about creating a team of specialists, and certainly decor and the allure is an element of the planning that needs to be on the team. So
right, right. Okay, thank you for that. So I look at your content and I love what you share on LinkedIn. And actually, it was through a video that I saw after I sent a connection request with you. I was like, I would love to have Heather read on this live. But one of the things that you tend to say in your content is that event contracts have changed over the years. And I was wondering, like, when have you noticed like the biggest change with event contracts?
so I've been in it a long time. So when SARS hit in Toronto
Oh,
area, for example, right, there was a shift there in suppliers in our industry, like hotels, conference centers, convention centers, caterers, etc. They all, you go back to, in times of trouble, you go back to your contract. And so there were shifts then about sharing risk primarily. Then we went through the recession of '08. Then we
yeah.
had 9/11, and things really like were even more locked down. Now we've gone through COVID, and COVID, I did a study with another planner in the first year of COVID, and we were looking at planners' responses. How did they deconstruct and recreate their events with COVID overshadowing it all? And the very first thing, the first course of action was, what does our contract say? And so, as a result of all of those different kinds of experiences, contracts have become highly legal documents. And rightly so. The suppliers, the hotels, the convention centers, everyone needs to protect themselves economically, reputationally, logistically. But what I do know to be absolute true is that those contracts that we are given, and most of our industry operates that the supplier produces the draft contract. Those are incredibly lopsided. They're one-sided contracts. They're created by that supplier's legal counsel to protect them. And the responsibility from the entrepreneur that's hosting the event, the association that's hosting their conference, those that are hosting events have to be as savvy and be able to identify where are these lopsided, where is there opportunity to negotiate protections for logistics, for performance, for financial responsibilities, all of that. So that's really COVID was a huge game changer. It was an extended period of financial devastation for the events industry and for event suppliers. And I feel that they're really finding every opportunity to reclaim revenue. And really, it's on the event host, whether that be the organizer, the association, corporate, entrepreneur. We have to know how to work with that and get to a more balanced state before signing that contract.
Yeah. It's funny, but not funny. So I have my pencil here. I take notes all the way through, and I do remember COVID, right?
Yeah,
But then you're mentioning these other events that happened, which I do remember them, but it's so weird how we put those aside. You mentioned SARS. Oh my goodness, I
yes,
remember. And I think like Toronto was considered to be a place where you should not travel to. And then,
absolutely.
yeah, then the recession of '08 and 9/11, and then COVID. Now, I don't know if you have an answer to this question, but with all of those things, those events in itself that have occurred, do you ever say to yourself, wow, we've been through all of that, and I wish at least we, we could, this could be a lesson that we have learned that we could carry on, that would have prepared us, right? Like, yeah.
I get where you're coming from, and that's my entire mission. You've wrapped it up in a nutshell because our memories are like our how we were affected lasts a long time, but our memories really are short when we think about risk. We are quick to lose sight of, protecting ourselves. It was interesting because even like the recession of '08, 9/11, all of the contracts, I'm going to use the example of the force majeure, which is something has happened that is beyond the control of either the supplier or the event organizer. So things like SARS and 9/11 and COVID, those were unanticipated, beyond the control of. But so are hurricanes and fires and floods and things like that. So it was interesting because we're not that far out of 9/11, like a decade or two decades, but generations have gone through. It's not in our collective industry mindfulness. And so like we have to constantly be coming back to what are the risks. And our newest generation of planners pre-COVID probably don't remember 9/11 or weren't in the industry, so that we have that top of mind that we have to look at this language. And so it is a constant case of reminding. I equate it to selling insurance. Right, we like this is an insurance policy. It really is something that you desperately need when things go sideways, but you can't have it if you didn't invest in it before things went sideways. So yeah, I think very much that we have to be constantly reminded of the risks that are associated with events.
Right, right. Well, so when it comes to like planning events, do you find that your clients, like, do they reach out to you right from the get-go? Because, there could be Slightly off topic, but I remember, like, so I'm married, and I remember my husband and I, we moved in years ago, and he was already living downtown. And as soon as I got to the apartment, I was like, we need insurance. We need to insure
Mm,
this apartment. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, I've lived here for, I've lived without insurance. So I'm that person. So
yep.
my question to you is that when somebody is in that, they're starting to plan their events, or an event planner needs to, they get that larger contract. Do you find that a lot of them immediately come to you, or do they already have like some knowledge about what to do in terms of reviewing a contract?
So I think both exist. So I know for sure I have had the privilege of supporting over 80 different organizations, whether they're associations, entrepreneurs, corporate clients, and I am top of mind and part of their process. So I've had an opportunity, you know, at some point to explain what I do and the value and benefit of what I do and how I do it. And so definitely those are top of mind. And that's fantastic. uh, there are absolutely event professionals and others who review contracts for other things. It's not that you can invest in every single contract, but I find that once someone understands what is the benefit, so it's the protecting against risks, it's protecting against financial loss, it's protecting against reputational loss, it's protecting against logistics not being executed properly. Once they understand, they see the value. And so my greatest obstacle from serving all is that opportunity to really educate why this is a worthwhile investment. Now, lots of events access legal counsel, and that absolutely, I am thrilled when they do. But what I will say is that a lot of legal counsel don't have 30 years of event experience, right? And
Mm,
so they're looking at indemnification, they're looking at termination language, they're looking at, waiving the right to a jury trial. They're looking at those really sophisticated legal aspects, but probably 85 to 90% of the contract are all the meeting related aspects that still need a seasoned professional's perspective on. So yeah, the education piece is a constant. It is something I constantly need to be doing to make the service known to folks.
right. It's very beneficial that, you have been in the business of planning events. So you
Yeah.
can see things on both sides. And that's like a huge benefit. I'm sure that's the reason why your name is spoken in rooms before things get started.
I I am blessed to have a network of actually a colleague just posted yesterday that she was talking about branding and that she's known as the LinkedIn lady, and as and she said Heather Reed is known as the contract lady, and so it's nice to have a niche and
Yeah,
to earn the respect of those that they will say, oh, if you need help with something, I know who you need to connect with. And
right,
that's been a privilege I've enjoyed for many years now. So,
right.
yeah.
Awesome. Now, would you be able to share with me like a couple of important points that tend to be overlooked? And you might have kind of alluded
Abs-
to it already, but
yeah, absolutely. I know in event planning, it can be a very exciting process. If you're an entrepreneur, which I know your audience, a lot are with coaches and speakers and things like that, or that are creating their own events. It is exciting. You are thinking about bringing together people. There's an energy when people are together. You are looking to accomplish a message being delivered. And it's exciting to think about the branding of that event and things like that. But what I know to be true is that in contracts are the hidden concerns, and those are what's going to affect my budget. How am I going to be protected if someone slips and falls at my event?
Mm.
What is, if I make financial obligations to a venue or a partner, if I don't meet those, what's going to happen? That's a concept called attrition in our industry. I mentioned force majeure. So what I know is that contracts quite often are like seem like a just check it off, but they're not just paperwork. They are protection, they are security, they are, you know, negotiating power when things don't go quite right. They are peace of mind. And so we need to really treat them as a really focused area in the event planning journey. And so that's one thing. The other thing that is quite common in our industry, I personally don't like the term hidden fees. I
Mm.
prefer them to be called undisclosed fees. But what happens in contracts is there's a lot of vague language, or there's a lot of silent language, particularly around charges and surcharges, penalties, fees, things like that. And for those that aren't informed, those can absolutely be a budget buster. Very difficult to deal with. And I would say very difficult to negotiate out of after you've signed a contract. The best time is before and knowing about those. So it's not only the legal protections. You need to be protected if someone were to slip and fall, as I said. If someone had an anaphylactic reaction to, like if you think you've planned an appropriate menu, but for some reason that delegate was served something with nuts in it, there you have to be protected. You can be sued as the entrepreneur and host of the event for things that maybe weren't your direct fault, but you were associated with that event. So I think those two to me are it's about protection. And like COVID, for example, COVID is a sorry, not COVID, force majeure with COVID events. You almost always have to invest money into a supplier before you ever get to execute the event. So for example, if you're doing an event in a hotel meeting room, quite often you've probably left $3,000 to $10,000 deposit in that venue. Well, if you can't host your meeting because of COVID, have you articulated what happens with that money? Right? Like,
Mm.
are you sure that you get it back? Do you get it back in full? Under what conditions, would the property take a percentage of that? So there's all sorts of risks that really, if you're not in that space, you probably are not thinking about. And I think knowledge is power. And so yeah, there's protection and there's also costs. And I'm an entrepreneur. I know that I don't like costs coming out of the blue and unannounced saying, haha, here I am. But in a contract, inevitably there will be. And it's on us to discover that before it's signed.
Right. So I'm going to be taking your term budget buster, and I'm probably going to be using that in my social media content. So when you talked about force majeure, and thank you very much for explaining that. Now you talked about that in terms of SARS, COVID,
Mm-hmm.
9/11. You didn't mention things recession like 2008, or there's talk now that we might be going through one. Does that kind of like, can force majeure be used in there or not really? And then is there something put in a contract where if a company, if the world is going through something like 2008 recession or so, that if maybe perhaps tickets aren't sold, like there's a clause in there where money can come back to the person who's trying to put the event on?
Well, this is where I say, please invest in legal counsel, because that is exactly their domain, is knowing exactly the intricacies and what will hold up in a court of law. That's really important. Like, what are the precedents around force majeure claims and things like that? My layperson understanding is that quite often financial situations such as a recession are not reasons for invoking a force majeure clause, unless you have been able to negotiate that that is an example of a force majeure incident, and then able to support it with evidence. So it's all about how you negotiate and what you negotiate. I know one of the pieces that's almost always missing, and perhaps the recession aspect may come into it, but there's always, what is the purpose of the event that you're contracting for? And it's an element that is rarely included in a contract, but it's on the responsibility of the event host, association, corporate, entrepreneur, whoever it is, to really uh, explain and expect it to be included in a contractual document. Why is this event being held, and what would negatively impact the success of this event? So I don't want to use financial, but I will use, for example, in COVID, a reception, a networking, a reception, a cocktail hour. The venues could host that event. Everyone had to be 6 feet apart, if you remember that time, right? So the venue would say, well, we could host this event, but the event host would say, but standing 6 feet apart defeats the purpose of networking. And so it's really about setting the stage for, what is this event about? Why are we hosting it? What will deter from its being successfully executed? And then obviously having really good legal counsel if recession, if you have international guests coming, if the borders close, if Pearson Airport were to shut down and 80% of your attendees were coming from across the country, they weren't local to Toronto. So there's all sorts of factors to build in. So it really is working with informed people like myself, with legal counsel, and you, the event organizer, to really come up with what will really protect my event.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. Well, so I would love to give you the opportunity to let me know, let everyone know what's going on in your world. Do you have anything that you want to highlight and share with the audience?
Oh, how long have you got, Dee? So there's a lot going on in my world, and I'm very blessed. As you know, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. I
Yeah.
think there's a special kind of, persistence and discipline to it. But I'm entering my 32nd year of being self-employed and entrepreneurial, and I'm actually working on the largest project of my career at this point. So I am working on a certification program for our industry, for the meetings and events industry. And it is focused obviously on my area of expertise, on contracts. And so it's called the Certified Event Contract Professional. And one of my core beliefs is that contracts are the foundation of every aspect of our events industry. As I said, it's from, catering to decor, to speakers, to AV, to registration, to marketing, to venues, to, you name it, every aspect. And yet it's an underserved area of knowledge in our post-secondary programs, both here and in the United States. So as I'm getting closer to the end of my career, I really wanted to find a way of downloading and sharing and creating a legacy project that shares my passion for what I've learned over the years, and to really help inform and empower our newest generation of event professionals, and those that have been in the industry but haven't had a focus on event contracts, perhaps. So that is, it's huge, Dee. I had no idea. I had no idea how involved. Well, I suspect you're probably a perfectionist and really want, and I am too, and I want this to be definitive and and really be worth the investment by someone. So We are a third of the way through the module creation. It's a big program, 15 modules, covering
Ooh.
everything from, what is a sleeping room? How do you categorize a hotel room with, a king bed or two queen beds or, a twin bed? Through food and beverage, which is the one that we're in production for right now. What's the difference between butlered service and buffet? And it's then how do you contract for those, and then getting into all of the risks. So we have students enrolled, and so it's kind of building the plane as I fly it in a sense. It's well mapped out, but I'm thrilled to say I have a collaborator. She's a subject matter expert that I have looked up to almost my entire career. Her name is Joan Eisenstadt, and she is the American guru,
Hmm.
planner guru for contracts. So she is my consultant on the project, and then it's being vetted by American and Canadian legal counsel so that it's really solid and has integrity. So that would be the project that is I'm still doing lots of contract reviews. That's my true bread and butter right now. Would love to do that for any entrepreneur or, anyone that's starting out and wanting to think about hosting events. Any corporate association. That is how I am funding the creation of the certification program, is through the other work. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about that. It is my passion, legacy, piece that is all consuming at this point. So
Yeah, well, congratulations on that, and congratulations on having the enrollment. And one of the things that I talk about in my content is that even now is like the best time to start diversifying, like what our
mm.
offers are. So way to go, way to go.
Well, it was, as a planner, I loved what I did. I loved having, getting the right people in the right room at the right time on the right day, right? Like that to me was absolutely wonderful. But I grew physically and mentally tired of the rigor that goes with that. And so it was like, how can I take what I love and kind of adapt how I'm working and what I'm working on? And it is a privilege now to be able to, I feel like I am educating, mentoring, supporting in just a very specific role, but a part of that big journey that I was a part of, but don't want to be now. So yeah, I'm at a sweet spot.
Nice, fantastic. Well, I have like one semi last question to ask you.
Okay.
And I like to ask my guests this. So, you know, I found you on LinkedIn, but
Sure.
so when it comes to your business, what are your favorite platforms that you use for what it is that you do?
So I've always used LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I used to love the seriousness of it. Right. I find it a little bit more, it's different now, but I still love the community that I follow and the community that I have in LinkedIn. Um, I also, I use a weekly newsletter to connect. It's not huge. I have 605 on my newsletter list. So, and that's international. So that's a wonderful way of staying connected and, educating. A lot of it is education. And then there's some, promotion pieces. And the latest thing that I have found to be tremendously valuable is exactly what we're doing here today. Back in October, I started a half-hour LinkedIn Live once a month. Called it Event Contracts Exposed.
Ooh.
And really, yeah, so I love the title in that I just take a tiny little nugget and dig into it for 20, 25 minutes. And that's been the greatest source of new folks to my world. Um, it allows me to reach second and third connections that so quickly, that I just wouldn't have had access to. So I know it's extra work in creating something. It's an extra lift, but I have found it in the last 6 months. I've just delivered number 6 last week. Tremendous. I'm really, really quality folks that are listening in. You just never know who is listening to your content. So yeah, so and behind the scenes, everything from Stripe to QuickBooks to all of that you have to put together to create a business that you can do business with others with. Yeah.
Right. Oh, thank you for sharing, like, some of the tools that you are using. I always like to ask that question because often entrepreneurs feel like they need to be everywhere. So I find that this
Yeah.
one part here is something that they really enjoy. It's like, okay, great. Okay, I didn't really love that platform, or, oh, newsletters. Maybe I'll start looking into that. So thanks for sharing
Well,
that.
and I think the newsletter, at least you own that data and that
Mhm.
connection, right? Like I actually went through a horrific, I lost everything on LinkedIn. I was hacked. I've been a premium
Mm.
member for since 2014, and I lost 4 years of content and posts. I lost all of my recommendations. I had 30 plus recommendations. I had to start at ground zero. And so you don't own LinkedIn, right? So,
Mm.
but your newsletter, your own newsletter, you own, and you own
Yeah,
that mailing list. So that was a huge lesson to me. Was it's one thing to invest in platforms, but create something that you have control over and can you know you still have to protect it and back it up and all of that stuff, but at
yeah.
least you're not losing it because someone hacked into it. So
Right, right.
yeah.
Oh, it's a good reminder. Well, so we're wrapping up, Heather, but
Awesome.
before we go, if you can please share like the best two places for everyone to, follow you and to, keep very much aware of like what's coming in your world at Planner Protect.
Great. Let's say my website, which we work very hard to keep up to
And
date.
your
So
own.
yes, yes, plannerprotect.ca. And then in regards to the LinkedIn Lives, I have a Planner Protect YouTube channel, so you can certainly connect in that way. And then my certification has a standalone website, and it's plannerprotect.ca slash, no, sorry, it's CECP plannerprotect.ca, I think. But anyways, you can Google certified event contract professional, and the website will pop up for sure. So, but Planner Protect is my home base, plannerprotect.ca.
Awesome. So I'm going to review to see if I have that. If I don't, I'm going to like reach out to you in the DMs and share it in the comments. So, well, thank you so much for saying yes,
Uh,
for being on this. I learned quite a bit, and like I said, I have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs who are in the event space or speakers. So I'm going to like tell them to come back and watch this. But yeah,
fantastic.
thank you so much for being here. And everyone, thank you so much for watching. And if you're watching the replay, do not forget to put in your website so we can come over and we can visit you a little bit later. So thanks, everybody. I will see you later on another episode of Strategize Your Business Online. And thank you again, Heather.
Thank you, Dee.